it on to her daughter.
Well, in due course, she died. And her daughter, Kirsty, I don't know the proper name, but they called her Kirsty Pope. She came to Wedding Cross and lived in a small thatched cottage opposite the pub. There was quite a big yard out of the back, which was the blacksmith's yard. And the boys of a Saturday used to go out to play quite a bit because there was a lot of old implements out there. Until it went in a outhouse. They shut the door. Now they said, "We've got it." So they went in very carefully and opened the door. And there was Kirsty Pope, no hair.
A far more sinister and more modern encounter with a witch hare was collected by Mike Yates. Not long ago he recorded a story from a Jasper Smith, who told him of the time his family pulled their wagons in for the night at a place called Green Lane at Leatherhead in Surrey. A moonlit night, and after they got the tea brewing over the fire, Jasper and his cousin Nelson decided to take their lurcher dogs over the nearby fields to pick up a rabbit or two for the pot.
And went out there with these dogs in the night time. There's plenty of rabbits and hares out there. And we'd catch several rabbits between us. These dogs hadn't brought them back to us. And it went across this bank, and Nelson's bitch Nell, she went after it. And we could see her gaining on it. Right on it to sort of chop at it, to bite it. And as she did, this thing made a funny noise, you know, sort of funny noise. And the dog went, yow, 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 and we stood there and looked at it. And when we looked at it, the dog stood, and we stood looking. And this thing grew in a matter of seconds. From a sort of rabbit, as we saw in the first place, seen in the first place, up to a sort of person. And it had long fingernails, long nails. And it sort of had a long tail, like a horse's tail, sort of come from it. And it sort of got bigger and bigger, and Nelson, and we couldn't speak to one another for several seconds. And when we turned around and ran, and got away, and we got home, we realised what it was. As we thought it was, I still say the day it was the same thing. I thought it was the devil. Either the bang or the witch.
Jasper's experience took place only recently, and yet, as you heard, the moment he thought he'd come face to face with a weird, primitive force, all the supposed rationalism of the modern world deserted him. Jasper's horrified reaction was identical to that which any villager would have shown hundreds of years ago, when belief in ill-wishing and the evil eye, werewolves and demons, was a part of everyday life.
Now, what generally happened in the event of these, if you like, humdrum, but nevertheless potentially quite critical domestic adversities, whether it be a child falling out of a tree while he was climbing there and breaking his leg, or whether it be the water in your well going bad, or whether it be your cow's milk being bloody, or whether it be the butter not coming, or whatever. What people generally did was not in the first instance to rush off to the magistrate and say, so-and-so is bewitching me and I want them hanged. What they would do in the first instance was apply some traditional local countermeasure. Indeed, sometimes these countermeasures were permanent. That is to say, you might bury a bottle containing certain objects such as bent pins or horseshoe nails at the threshold of your house, or of the keep the power of witchcraft away. You might get those little pebbles which have got holes in them, and put those on a bit of string or a bit of band or whatever, and hang those up in your cow byre. You might even hang such a thing on the key to your door, or of course the famous thing of nailing up a horseshoe. Now, if you like, those are prophylactics. That's supposed to stop it happening in the first place, right? Well, suppose despite this, it happens anyway. What you do, you pop along to some local lady or gentleman who is called a cunning man or a cunning woman, or sometimes called a white witch, or sometimes called a wise man or a wise woman. These people are counteracting problems which have occurred through bewitchment. They do other things as well, by the way. They find lost or stolen goods for you. They find missing persons. So you could go to him if your cow fell ill, and chances are he might know what was wrong with it and he'd fix it up for you, or if he couldn't manage it, he'd probably say, oh, well, the cow's been bewitched. So then the question was, Well, who's bewitching it? Right, now, then, these men or women would have ways of finding that out. Sometimes they would look in a glass, or they would do methods of divination by opening a page of the Bible and reading the verses at which it fell out to see if they could get anything out of that. But various ways of divination that they had to determine who was doing the bewitching.
Tony Green from Leeds University. Once you'd found out who the culprit was, there were various steps you could take to break the spell, from extreme measures like throwing the guilty party on the fire or drowning them, to what was called scoring above the breath. This involved scratching or cutting the supposed witch above the nose and mouth to draw blood, because it was in the blood that the witch's power was believed to lie. Unfortunately, people often got so carried away when scoring above the breath that they sometimes ended up by chopping the whole of the witch's head off. This effective method of breaking a spell was the common one of driving a nail into the witch's footprint. Wilf Norman remembers it actually happening in Somerset.
A man became ill and he was in bed for weeks. The doctor came and saw him several times and he couldn't do anything about it at all. So the family considered they should consult another authority. So they heard of a wise man at Exeter, and they went to Exeter and saw him. And he said to them, on a certain day, a certain person will walk through your yard. Now you must get a nail made, and it must not be touched by human hand in the making. They did this. The local blacksmith, Thomas Baker, made this nail. And he said, now you must drive that a certain day, this person that's causing all the trouble will walk through your yard, and you must drive this nail in the print of their boot in the mud. They did this. The man got quite well and lived for years. I knew him when he was an old man. And the person that was causing the trouble went crippled for the rest of their life.
The typical English village must have at that time been quite a magical battleground, with spells and counter-spells as thick in the air as flies round a jam pot. From these more exotic aspects of life, the village witch, wise woman or wise man, was frequently called on to sort out cases of lice, fleas, boils or ringworm, in the additional role as part-time village doctor and herbalist. They've better knowledge of herbal remedies and bone setting than the practitioners of more orthodox medicine. Herbs and potions apart, many cures were effected by charms, and it's interesting that most of the surviving charms that have come down to us over the centuries have been vernacular versions of the Catholic Creed, or prayers addressed to God, Christ, or the Virgin Mary. Here's a charm from a lady who always addressed her charms or prayers to the Holy Trinity.
Ringworms come or ringworms go, and may it leave this person that she may be free. I ask this in thy name, in God's name, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. May it be so.
So it's possible that a lot of people accused and executed for witchcraft were doing nothing more harmful than muttering garbled Catholic prayers in a suspicious Protestant community. These muttered charms, accompanied by stroking and touching, plus the occasional eccentricity, such as the 6 pea pods of the next story, have always been familiar to country people throughout the British Isles.
When I was a youngster in my part of Oxfordshire, there was this old lady who lived on the edge of the common, very near the village that I lived in. She was reputed to be able to cure warts and boils and things like that. And when I was about 7, I should think, I had warts all over my hands, and the thing to do was to take this old lady, Liza, 6 pea pods, but you hadn't to say a word to her. She knew why you had come. She took my 2 hands in hers and turned them round and counted the warts. And then just said, "Go on your way. They'll be all gone in 3 weeks' time." And sure enough, in 3 weeks' time, all those warts of mine had gone. And apparently she cured many, many people of these things. Then there was one old fellow, and he lived in a cottage all on his own with 8 black cats. And it was never any more than 8, just cats that followed him absolutely everywhere. And people would go to him with all sorts of complaints, and they said that he could cure anything, from boils to bald heads, bandy legs, absolutely anything, rheumatism, all sorts of things. And he didn't charge anything, but people would pay him in kind. That is, they'd take him a hare or potatoes or apples and meat, anything, and that is how he got his living.
I wonder if those 8 black cats were the old fella's familiars that we were talking of earlier. Eric Maple had a really spooky story of familiars, but this time they were 9 white mice. It's just the kind of story to send the kids to bed with. And talking about spooky things, don't forget to listen next time. The subject is ghosts.
I came upon a very weird old story of a witch who died, and when they went to her cottage to clear out her bits and pieces, they could find, just a few things worth keeping, but there was an old dresser. But no one liked to open the drawer, because from within the drawer came a rustling sound. But if in the drawer, took out a box, and they'd opened the box, 9 white mice going round and round and round. And they all got in a terrible state of agitation about it. But a wise old man who said he knew all about witches said, "They're her imps." He said, "You know what happens? You'll never get rid of them. Never get rid of them until we take them and we go to the churchyard and we open up the grave and we bury the white mice with their mum." And so they went to the churchyard, all very agitated. And as it happened, the grave hadn't been filled in. So they lowered the ropes and pulled out the coffin, unscrewed it. And all the little white mice, seeing the old woman who was just like a wooden doll, a rigid doll with a face absolutely set, gave loud screams and all leapt into the coffin and all snuggled up closely to her in the winding sheet. And the old man who told me that said, and would you believe it, just before they screwed down the lid of the coffin again, they saw a smile on the face of the corpse.